Hi investigators, Mike Evans with episode 87 of Spy Curious. And in this episode, we're looking at everybody's favourite subject, fraud. So in relation to fraud investigations, what you'll be doing as a licensed private investigator. So hitting the headlines last week was this lady on the Gold Coast. They reckon she's issuing fake COVID-19 exemptions. And the newspaper is saying anyone using it could be charged with fraud. Now, that's the newspaper's opinion, not necessarily mine. Depends how you're using it. What if you're using it as a joke and have it framed on your wall or something like that? I don't know. It depends what use is. We're going to go a little bit deep into that. And today we're going to be concentrating on the state of Victoria. Now, in relation to fraud in Victoria, it comes under the Crimes Act 1958, which is a wonderful document if you'd like to read it. This is what the police use, and just about every perversion you can possibly think of is catered for in the Crimes Act 1958. There's pages and pages and pages of it, and you can go and have a look at that for yourself. G'day, Renee, good to see you. So, Crimes Act 1958, State of Victoria, that's where you're going to find basically all about fraud. Now, that's what the police use. So how does that relate to private investigators? Well, you might go out and do an investigation on a stolen motor vehicle for general insurance, a home arson for general insurance, Transport Accident Commission matter, a Victorian WorkSafe matter, public liability matter, or a corporate matter, and you might find it's fraud. Now, the people that instructed you to go and do that and paid you to do that would then, if they felt that it was fraudulent or whatever, they would go to the police and they'd say, here's the investigator's report. It's basically a hand-up brief. And the police will say, thanks for doing our work for us. That's really kind of you. We will now go to the court and have this person charged with fraud. That's how serious it gets. Now, if they are charged with fraud and it gets through, they could be facing in Victoria up to 10 years imprisonment. Now, if they're charged with 6 charges of fraud, you can just keep upping the ante as it goes. So your reference down there to see what the guidelines in relation to fraud are in Victoria, and it's very similar in other states, is the Crimes Act 1958. That's if the police are going to run with it. Now, of course, WorkSafe and TAC, the big employers of investigators down there, will have their own internal policies and procedures about fraud and what they do. So here's an example of a person who's been fined in order to repay workers' compensation. He's got to pay back $18,000 to WorkSafe. Here's another one where a workers' compensation fraud has led to a man serving 9 months in jail. Now, again, that is WorkSafe Victoria. So another fraud here, it's described as the person was jailed, a breathtakingly audacious fraud, $112,000 in benefits the person got for claiming to be in a wheelchair bound and in need of 24-hour care. So that's a pretty big one that goes back to 2013. Now, it's not just people who claim WorkSafe that commit fraud. It's suppliers to WorkSafe who commit fraud. Only in living memory, there was a service provider psychologist to WorkSafe billing them monthly for consultations with claimants that he never did. In fact, what they did, they checked his basically flights overseas and that sort of thing. And basically he was over in Czechoslovakia and claiming he was seeing clients in central Melbourne, and he wasn't doing it by video either because they didn't have capacity to do that. So suppliers to WorkSafe commit fraud, claimants can commit fraud. So there's a lot of suppliers to WorkSafe, doctors, home carers. There are a real range of people, psychologists, a whole range of people. Any one of them could commit fraud. But the examples we've given you today are people that have been convicted for fraud there at WorkSafe. Now, is it just WorkSafe that does that? No, WorkSafe are actually pretty soft. They're really easy. That you'll probably get away with a good fraud against WorkSafe for quite a long time, but the one you won't get away with is the TAC. So TAC have got listed here, as you can see in the video. They've had over $2,600,000 worth of frauds in 50 matters that they're pursuing. And they've had guilty pleas from people so far for $293,119. And the TAC are very active in prosecuting people who commit fraud. And you jump on their website and you can see here some people. So here's Jesse in front of Judge Wigton. Jesse's gone and committed a bit of fraud, and basically you can see all about the case there, what happened. So he's got to pay back $46,023 and been $3,000 in costs. So that's pretty amazing. And you can scroll through the list of people on the TAC website. So here's Blaze. What's Blaze done? Blaze has gone and got him or herself into trouble, been fined $5,000. And professional costs of $1,986 and $84,770 has got to be paid back by Blaze. Might be being paid back at $2 a week, who knows? And then over here we've got another person in front of Judge McKenna. And as we scroll through, we can see Colin Nim, pretty ordinary. These are pretty easy, lightweight, $6,000 fraud there. We've got some decent ones. Come on, TAC, give us a decent fraud. We keep scrolling, see what we can get. Won't take long, doesn't go forever. We'll see what Melody's done. And Melody has got herself into trouble with the TAC for $43,869.40. So that's got to be paid back to the TAC. So the TAC actually really pursue it hard. Work safe, really, really soft. So don't go and try and commit fraud against the TAC. They don't like giving money away down there in Geelong at the TAC. G'day, TAC. Great supporters of Spy Curious at the TAC. They'd like to watch us and send me nice emails about how they've enjoyed it. And here we've got Reese. What's Reese done with his fraud at the TAC? Reese has pled guilty and he's got $25,978.40 to pay back in relation to his matter with the TAC. So that's a TAC example, and you've seen some WorkSafe examples there that have been followed through. Now, the TAC don't go to the police and get them to do it. They do it themselves. They've got their own internal prosecution team. WorkSafe will have a mix of that sort of thing, depending on the size of it, maybe the jurisdiction, that sort of area. So concentrating on Victoria, let's just have a look at it. So fraud in Victoria includes a number of offences which involve deception, including the offence of obtaining property by deception. So it's covered in the Crimes Act, as you can see there. It requires an intention to permanently deprive the rightful owner of the property. Now, that property may include money, it may include land, it may include furniture or whatever. So that's the definition in Victoria. They're always looking at deception. If you want the police to cooperate with your fraud investigation in Victoria, as soon as you say by deception, they're the two key words. You suddenly have got their interest and you've got their cooperation. If you don't say by deception, they'll go, no, we're too busy. We've got terrorists, we've got domestic violence. We're not interested in that. But you say to them, yes, officer, but it's by deception. They're going to get a promotion if they go through and prosecute that successfully. And that's what every police officer, they all want to become lieutenant or general or whatever police officers become. I don't know. The term property is given a wide meaning under Section 71 of the Crimes Act, includes all real and personal property and specifically includes money and intangible property. What the hell is intangible property? Well, it might be shares, it could be investments, intellectual property, it could be goodwill. So all of those things are property. So they could be included. It's a very wide meaning. Two things you've got to get used to as an investigator in civil investigations is the wide meaning of property. Okay, it's not just a house. It's not just a skyscraper. It can be goodwill. intellectual property, a trademark, which if you've been watching this program regularly, you see I've had my trademark almost flogged by a bunch of cowboys in America. They called their program PI Curious. My trademark program you're watching now is called Spy Curious. So that's intangible property and property. So moving right along, the term deception is given a particular legal meaning when discussing fraud in Victoria. Deception is defined in the section of the Act. One example of deceiving or misleading someone about what you are intending to do in a particular act. You're basically lying about what you're going to do. So you can think of, g'day, Shell. Good to see you. Great to see you, Shell. Think of it as a lie told to gain a benefit, chattel, or advantage. That's the way we like to put it to cover the whole of Australia. But today, we're just looking specifically at Victoria. In order to be considered deception, the accused conduct or words must be either intentional or reckless. To behave in a reckless way is essentially to say or do something knowing that there is a substantial risk that it might be deception, but carrying on anyway. So, ignorance of the law is no excuse. If you follow it through, and you'll hear it again and again, an act or an omission. So the act is following it through even though you know it's wrong. It's also necessary for the deception to actually play a part in obtaining the property. That is, there must be a cause and effect relationship between the deception and the property actually being obtained. Now, a good example of this is if you lie on your resume, say you've got a whole stack of qualifications that you do not have, okay, and you don't get the job, then there is no cause and effect relationship between the deception and the property actually being obtained because you didn't get the job. But if you lie on your resume and you get the job, like the man who got the job as the marketing manager for Myer some years back in Victoria, it was followed right through by Myer when they found out he didn't know what he was talking about as a retail manager in marketing, and they got the police to prosecute him because he got the job from his lie, his deception. That's why the police followed through with that and charged him with it. And you can look that up. Retail marketing manager, fraud by deception, Victoria. It's a really good read. You learn how to do some fraud but get caught. It wasn't very clever. For fraud-related offences in Victoria, the word dishonesty also carries a particular meaning. A person behaves dishonestly if they purposely obtain an item or property without the genuine belief that they had a legal right. So you walk down the street and you find $10 lying on the ground. You think, right, no one's about. I'll take that $10, stick it in my pocket and keep it. Okay, so there you go. You think you have a legal right to something you just found. Well, you don't. So you're just stolen by finding. So effectively, you didn't have a legal right to that. So keep that in mind. Obtaining a financial advantage. So all about obtaining a financial advantage is there. It's the property, it's the chattel, it's the goods, it's the advantage. You get a financial advantage over everybody else. So you apply for a loan. The bank's only got 10 loans to give out this week. You lie about your income. You get the loan. Another person who had a genuine income, didn't lie about it, who's number 11, they don't get the loan and they missed out. You got a financial advantage over that person. If you're a business and you lie in a tender for WorkSafe or TAC, right, and someone else doesn't get it, there's going to be a big fuss about that because you lied about it. And there's always going to be someone that doesn't like you who's going to find out about that and report it. And that lie told that's given you a financial advantage is fraud by deception. There are other offences for fraud in Victoria. They're accounting, falsification of documents. So you're caught out and you go and try and change things. false statements in company directors, expression of documents, suppression of documents. That means you're hiding them, you're not giving them up. And all those are listed in the Crimes Act, and you can see that in there. So keep in mind, these are things that you can be charged with. Don't falsify documents. So remember what I told you about the supplier of psychological services to WorkSafe. He was in Czechoslovakia sending in false invoices to WorkSafe. He was over there for some 6 months doing it, and WorkSafe charged him with that and with fraud through that falsification of invoices. What happens if you want to commit fraud in Victoria and you're in New South Wales? It's outside the police's jurisdiction. No, it's not in the Crimes Act. They have extraterritorial offences. A person does or admits to do an act or thing referred to in sections 81, 87, outside or partly outside Victoria, and there's a real substantial link with the meaning of subsection 2 between doing or omitting to do the act or thing. Victoria, those sections apply to the act or thing or the omission as it had been done or admitted to be done wholly within Victoria. So this is two businesses getting together to game the system. Now, it might be something related, I don't know, to gambling regulation. Could be a couple of casinos, or could be a couple of pubs on the border with poker machines, and you're only allowed to have X amount, and they take them around, that sort of thing, and chuck them on the back of a ute and have them over there for Friday night, and then bring them over here for Tuesday afternoon when pensioners all go to this pub, and they've got an extra couple of pokies in there they shouldn't have because they hope the regulator isn't there watching on Tuesday afternoon. So you can be charged if you are committing fraud in Victoria in association with someone else or just by yourself in relation to fraud, and there is no border protection for you. Now, keep in mind that if you are a licensed private investigator and you are doing an investigation in Victoria and you need to go to New South Wales to investigate the matter because criminals don't recognise borders, they don't have that, right? Doesn't work that way. You are going to need a licence in New South Wales as well. That's our system currently. It's state-based licensing. So if you're working in a border area, it's good to have a Victorian licence and a New South Wales licence. In Queensland, if you live in Tweed Heads, it's good to have a Queensland licence and a New South Wales licence as well. It just protects you from that sort of thing, enabling you to follow through on your CTP liability investigation, workers' comp investigation, your fraud investigation, regardless of what it is. So, where a person dishonestly with a view to gain for himself or another, or with intent to cause loss of another, destroys, defaces, conceals, falsifies any account, any record or document made or required for any accounting purpose, in furnishing information for a purpose, produces or makes use of any account or any such record or document is aforesaid to which his knowledge or may be misleading, false or deceptive in a material particular, he is guilty of an indictable offence and liable to a level 5 imprisonment of 10 years. So, you're in New South Wales and you commit offence in Victoria and you fit all of those things, acting dishonestly to cause a loss to other businesses in an industry or whatever, you are facing a maximum of 10 years in prison. Now, that's pretty good. You'll go along to your first day in prison. They'll say, "What are you in for, mate?" And they go, "Falsifying documents." And you're there with a bunch of murderers and killers. It's not a good look. So don't commit fraud like that. It won't end well. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime. A person must not use a document which is and which he or she knows to be false with the intention of inducing another person to accept it as genuine, and by reason of so accepting it to do or not to do some act the other person or other person's prejudice. Again, 10 years maximum. So you add the slide I just showed you to this one, and you've done both, you're looking at maximum of 20 years, which is pretty harsh if you get that. I don't think people do these days, but maybe once upon a time they did. Conspiracy to commit an offence. This is also in the Crimes Act, and this is where people collude to game a system or an industry or something like that. So, subject to this act, if a person agrees with any other person or persons that a course of conduct shall be pursued which will involve the commission of an offence by one or more of the parties to the agreement, he is guilty of the indictable offence of conspiracy to commit that offence. Now, this is the Crimes Act 1958. They say he. I apologise for the non-inclusive language. I'm just saying what it says in the Crimes Act. If you look at the size of the document, I'm sure they'd say to you, yes, if you take offence from that, you can come in with us and rewrite it all, and that'll help us out and volunteer because it'll cost us too much money to do it. It's an act. They don't just change the wording to suit the thinking of the time. So if you've been watching my program earlier today, I explained in there that I was contacted by someone that basically abused me. And I recognised the signs of this person who was attacking me and swearing at me and saying I did these things. I recognise this person as a very disturbed person. Now, what he did, he made a complaint about me after the phone call. Here's the actual complaint. You can look it up. You can go to the regulator and see the complaint. It's not true, but he did it. So it's case ID 7770145, lodged with the federal regulator in Melbourne on the 23rd of the 4th, 2020 at 2:24 in the afternoon, just after the conversation he had with me. What he did, he created a document and he had his name on it, his email address, his telephone number. It's time-stamped by the system. His issue, which was imaginary, was I wouldn't help him by taking part in, not that, this. He wanted me to take part in a conspiracy to commit an offence. Now, I said no. He said he was an ex-Victorian police officer and he wanted me to, and I was going to, and I said, no, I'm not doing that for you. I don't know you. I've never received any contact before, and you've just abused me. And he did that. Now, I refused to take part in that. So you can look up that complaint he made and see that's my refusal to the regulator. The regulator didn't follow through on it. The regulator's lack of action in following through on it and getting in contact with me is probably going to cost, before Christmas 2021, a business down there its license to do business. That's a $5 million turnover plus business that receives a lot of government funding. So that is a very severe outcome. If you're a regular follower of my programs, you'll see that, and you've heard me say it before, I go to court and I watch people in court and I watch the system in court just to brush up and keep up with it. I have to. I teach it. I teach it across 4 different qualifications. So I go there and observe. You can go into any court in Australia except the family court or the children's court, and as long as it says open on the door, you can go in there and watch. Now, I'll go in there and watch and I'll see what's going on. The bottom end of courts in Queensland, where I live, Surfers Paradise, at the Southport Court, is the overnight arrest court. That's where they deal with the lower end matters, and they're small, someone urinating in the street, someone with a spliff, someone who started a fight because he was tough when he had a few drinks in him. And he came second. As someone who had a swing at a couple of police officers, that he was intoxicated, the police officers were sober, and he spent the night waiting to come out and be bailed by the court. It's a constant, absolute constant. And they're there in singlets and shorts and thongs, and they got their cap on backwards, and the magistrate will say, take your cap off, and the magistrate will fine them $35 and $6 costs. And it's just a machine. It's just a retail machine of dealing with people that got themselves into strife. There'll be a few odd domestic violence cases and some very, very sad cases. You'll see the preliminary matter where the ladies that have been domestically violent, under domestic violent attack for 10 years. And last night they had a gutful. That was the last one. They picked up the kitchen knife and stuck it in the prick. You'll see that. It's very sad. And I go there and I watch these things. Now, what makes it interesting is none of the people are represented legally. They just stand there, go, yeah, all right. Thanks, Your Honour. Sorry, thanks, Your Majesty. You just fined me $35 and $6 costs. Can I have 6 months to pay that off? I'm unemployed and I've got no prospects. And the magistrate, I'll give you 3 months. If it's not paid, a warrant will be issued. Right? So they have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. It's not the first time most of them have been in there. But when a person in my local court is charged with fraud in the overnight arrest court where it's dealt with, the matter's been taken up by the insurance company because the person's faked the stealing of their motor vehicle because they couldn't afford it anymore. And what they've done is they've got a mate to take it with the keys, drive it up the bush and burn it. Knowing that it's insured, they're going to claim that they've lost completely their vehicle. It's been entirely burnt, right? It's gone, okay? And they don't have to pay the money back to the bank. Now, the insurance company's not going to have that. So they investigate these things. They find, they interview the owner of the vehicle. They check. They go through phone records and they say, mate, what's this phone call you made from this area in the bush on 3 a.m. on this day when you said you were home in bed in that area in the suburbs? Why did you make a phone call from there? Well, I went and did it myself and I got drunk and done it and I got rang my mate to come and pick me up. So they find out that it's fraud, total outright fraud. The person has faked the stealing of their own motor vehicle. It's very common. People get themselves in all sorts of trouble. So what they do is they go to court and they have a court-appointed solicitor with them, not a barrister, solicitor. And the court-appointed solicitor is wearing a suit and standing next to them. Now, in this case, the person who's the accused, they're not in their shorts, singlet and thongs. They're in suits too. They're perfectly well-dressed and they are very well-groomed. Because their lawyer has told them, you are facing in Queensland as a penalty for insurance fraud, the same penalty as you get for murder, 14 years in prison. So if this magistrate's had a bad day last night and is grumpy today, or their European luxury vehicle was stolen on the weekend by a couple of 15-year-old hoons on the Gold Coast and totaled, and that vehicle was the love of the magistrate's life, and they're getting difficulty and drama and lots of questions from the insurance company themselves, this person's not going to have any patience with you. So the magistrate says, please stand for sentencing. And the fraudster and their solicitor both stand up. And what you see when you're observing from the back of the room is this person who's been told, you've been a great, nice person, you made a mistake, you are facing 14 years in jail as a maximum penalty. You see them visibly shaking, waiting for the magistrate to pass their sentence. And the magistrate will go, okay, I've got references here from the church. Your mum and dad are both here in the court today. You've been offered a job. Your prospects are good. You've made a mistake. You are going to have to pay back that $60,000 or $40,000 to the insurance company. You must pay that back. I won't record a conviction on this time. You'll have to do 50 hours of community service. I appreciate you pled guilty at the earliest opportunity, and you made a stupid mistake while affected by alcohol. Don't ever come back to my court again. If you do, bring your toothbrush and your face washer and your underpants, because you will go to jail. That's what they say. And if it's a young girl and it's a magistrate who's a lady, and I've seen it, they'll go, When you go inside, miss, they just love young blondes inside. Now, the magistrate does that to scare the living bejesus out of them, because she doesn't want her court filled up with young kids bragging about their behaviours on Facebook, that sort of. So when they say that sort of thing, it really sends a message to people. So fraud's a very serious outcome. If you're charged with it, get legal representation straight away, right? Don't mess around. There are defences to fraud, all right? Not if you go in and burnt your own vehicle. There was 2 ladies on the Gold Coast just last week. You'll see it in Spy Curious News this Friday. What they did, they had a dispute with an ex-friend, and they decided they're going to go and burn the ex-friend's car. So they Googled on the internet how to burn a car. Then they went out with their EFTPOS card, bought a jerry can from a car supplies place. They went to a service station, filled it up full of fuel, and then they drove to their friend's place and set that vehicle on fire. And one of them got severely burned in it and ended up in hospital. And they ended up in court last week. See the outcome of that one, people? Watch Spy Curious, 2 p.m. this Friday, and see what happened to those 2 ladies when they went to court. Yes, they committed a crime that was arson, wasn't fraud, but that's our presentation and an idea of how fraud works in Victoria. The police don't really get involved in insurance fraud unless the insurance company says we are following through on this. Corporate fraud, the police don't really get involved in it unless the corporation says, yes, we are now going to go and report that accountant to the police and have them charged. The prospects of recovering the money that's stolen corporately is very low, because most of it goes through the poker machines, and the person will claim they've had a very sad life and whatever, and yeah, they might go to jail for it, but it doesn't get your money back. So fraud happens. You will investigate it. It's great fun. The most fraud is in general insurance. So if you ever get the opportunity to do general insurance investigations, do it. There are lots of general insurance investigation firms around Australia, and they'd love to hear from you with your licence in your application and your Australian Security Academy Certificate 3 in Investigative Services. I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy. I'll be back with you tomorrow with avenues of inquiry, something to look forward to. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.